Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Sage Talk for Wicked Problems. My name is Meryl Fury. I am the co-founder of Sage Circle Alliance. I'm here with two of my most favorite people. We have Paul Chatlin, my partner in crime, co-founder of Sage Circle with me, and our most wonderful guest, Dr. Michael Klaper. Now, yes, clapper. We're going to let Dr. Klaper introduce himself because his list of accomplishments is way too long. So we're going to let him choose his favorites and say what he wants about himself. Dr. Klaper, please introduce yourself.
Well, thank you, Meryl, and thank you, Paul. As the two initials in front of my name, DR, imply, I am a Western-trained physician. I graduated from the University of Illinois College of Medicine. I've had postgraduate training in surgery, anesthesia, and obstetrics at the University of California, San Francisco. And for the past five decades, I've been a primary care physician doing blood and guts medicine in places like Canada, California, Florida, Hawaii, and New Zealand. And as much as I enjoy practicing acute care medicine and patching people up, that kind of medicine just doesn't get to the root of why people are sitting in front of us, in front of doctors all over the country, all over the world, overweight, hypertensive, diabetic, clogged up and inflamed from what they are eating. And since that cause is never really mentioned in medical school, for the past almost 4 years, I've been devoted to our nonprofit Moving Medicine Forward initiative, where I go to the nation's medical schools and try and reach the young medical students with the message that it's the food your patients are eating that are creating these bodies. And until you deal with that, you're just going to be treating symptoms. So I'm trying to be the best physician I know by getting to the root of the nation / the world's medical problems. And so it's just a joy to be with you to explore these very important subjects. So thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. What I'm going to put this in right here. That is a super wicked, gnarly problem. We know the cause of these illnesses and we have a very difficult time addressing them. So let me just describe what is a wicked problem. In issues, a wicked problem is an issue that persists, even though most people agree it is detrimental to health, the planet, human decency, compassion, or the equality of all living beings. Wicked problems are gnarly. They have tentacles that touch other issues and areas, and they're held in place, curiously enough, by conflicting interests or people that benefit from the problem's existence, either financially or in power. Because of that, problems like Dr. Klaper just described are difficult to resolve. But really, clearly, anybody looking can see nobody wants to be diabetic, hypertensive, clogged up, or inflamed. So that's what we're going to be talking about today.
What a remarkable definition. That's a really beautiful angle to come in at these very gnarly problems, as you say. They're very well drawn. It's going to be wonderful to explore them.
Well, thank you. Thank you. We're going to hope this is a refreshing kind of conversation because you're on an awful lot of podcasts and an awful lot of stages. We'll give you a fresh look at things, or, you give us a fresh look at things for that. So here's the first question. How do you think we got into this predicament where we have these illnesses that people can see, but we don't address them?
Oh my, this is, as you say, tentacles upon Gordian knots that feed on each other and hold each other in place. And I know there's a premium placed on curt, concise answers here, but this is...
Sometimes it's not possible, so okay.
Fair enough. Well, since the early part of last century, in the 1910s, 20s, 30s, as modern medicine assumed the mantle of solid science, it was a wonderful era in medicine, and ancient scourges of medicine, pain and infection that used to carry people off, were beginning to be conquered. There was chloroform anesthesia. You could do surgery on people while they slept through it. The early antibiotics, arsenicals and sulfa drugs started appearing, and we could treat infections. And so it was exciting, and that's where all the attention went. And the effects of food on people's bodies. There was no way to measure it back then, though there certainly is now. And there's this, it was not viewed as real science, like chemistry and physics and physiology, where you could do experiments and repeat them and get the same results. Food is food. And not only was it difficult to measure scientifically, but there's this huge cultural overlay, which still is present today. And this ethnic group eats meat and cheese, and that ethnic group smokes cigarettes and uses alcohol. This one uses various other foods, oils in their cuisine. And that's taboo subject. You can't talk about people's culture, can't talk about their diet. And so it's easy just to skirt around it. The medical school curriculum that the students have to slog through in 4 years is so jam-packed with biochemistry, anatomy, physiology, that dietetics, it was easy to ignore it. And it's been ignored, still is ignored in medical schools across the country. So it was a lumbering beast to medical education that staggered into its current configuration. And a lot of things are holding it in place. Money comes in from the drug industries, the meat industry, et cetera, that let's keep things the way they are. Just keep focusing on drugs and surgery, and don't worry about the food thing. That's too squishy. And so it's been easy to bypass it. But the results of that neglect have been catastrophic on personal levels, social levels, financial levels. It's a tragic oversight that we really need to correct. And that's why I'm so glad to be here today to talk about this very issue.
Yeah, thank you. That's quite a history we're coming from there. Paul, you have
Indeed.
a question?
I do. And, Michael and I go way back because, we created a medical course material, and I asked Dr. Michael Klaper, to do the review of it. And when he came to me and said, "Can you give it to me?" I handed it to him because I knew that he was trying to do something that I could only dream of personally. And he had the title and the background. That being said, as I did my digging that took about a year and a half to create the curriculum, I spent a lot of time, picking apart the Hippocratic Oath. And I ask the question all the time, which is, if doctors are to prevent people from hurt, I'll just say, make it really simple, and yet they run away from the root cause of what is hurting people, which is their diet. I'm going to reflect for a moment. When you were talking about the 1910s, 20s, 30s, and 40s, they didn't have the ultra processed food. Sure, they ate meat. Sure, they probably had dairy, but they didn't have, all the processed food that people could literally eat every day, every month of every day, every year, and think that they're, and they feel fulfilled. All the while, people are dying younger. Kids are getting diabetes earlier. That all being said, with the Hippocratic Oath surrounding the question, I don't understand, and maybe you could help me. Why is it that doctors sign the Hippocratic Oath, and yet they go to work every day and don't keep their promise? Why?
They're blind. There's a blindness involved. Just like you can be colorblind, you can be nutrition blind. And you walk into most big hospitals, there's a McDonald's in the lobby, or there's a fast food restaurant there. Why? Is there? Clearly, there's a blindness that allows it, and a little venal underpinning there. The hospital makes money off of the restaurant, and that keeps it in place. And the culture, they don't want to to remove the fast food restaurant. It's un-American. They have a Wendy's or a McDonald's in your lobby. You're a good old American institution there. So there's a lot of reasons to keep this blindness going. And but you asked me about the specific physicians. There are multi-layered issues here. Nutrition is not looked at as a real science, a sissy science. Send them to the dietitian. Don't bother me. I'm up in the operating room doing real medicine. But what are you doing up in the operating room, doctor? You're dealing with the infections and the infarctions and the amputations from what your patients are eating. You're all dealing with nutrition diseases that could be handled better in the outpatient clinic. Keep the patient off the operating table in a few minutes, in a few visits. So it's not valued as a science. We're not taught about it. Most medical schools don't mention the word nutrition. If so, it's talking about scurvy and diseases we don't see anymore. And when I talk to my colleagues about, well, why don't you talk to your patients about nutrition? One, I don't know anything about nutrition. I've never taught about it. I don't have time to do this counseling. I got a waiting room full of patients out there. And I don't get paid for it. So don't bother me with this nutrition stuff. It's enough to me to pound down their blood pressure with beta blockers and control their cholesterol with statins. And I'm lucky if they take their pills so they don't have their stroke when I'm on call. A little cynical there, but so there's a lot of like an old shoe that's been worn in a certain pattern, and nutrition is on the outside of that pattern. There's lots of reason to ignore it, and still the doctor makes a nice salary. The hospital makes lots of money off doing these procedures. Everybody wins except the patient, and ultimately the doctor. The patient loses because as I'm going around to the nation's med schools and I give them the lecture, what I wish I learned in medical school about nutrition. And I wish someone had told me that, one, these reversible diseases, no one ever told me that high blood pressure is reversible. In fact, we get the opposite message. They will take these pills the rest of their life. This is lifetime medication. Not only can you get patients off blood pressure pills, you have to get them off. Once they get healthy, their blood pressure dropped down to their boots. So I wish someone told me type 2 diabetes is reversible. Once on insulin, always on insulin, I was taught. Well, nonsense. People get leaner on a plant-based diet and their insulin receptors open up and they don't need insulin, exogenous insulin anymore. And you have to stop the insulin. So one, I wish someone had told me these reversible diseases, and I wish someone had told me that a plant-based diet, a whole plant food diet, is the key to reversing these diseases. And those two pieces of information alone would revolutionize medicine. But by ignoring it, again, the patient loses the chance to really cure their disease, to really get healthy. The doctor loses the opportunity of seeing their patients get healthy, the patient satisfaction. So great to see your patients turn into healthy human beings in front of your eyes. The doctor loses that. Society loses. Our healthcare system takes trillions of dollars in bypasses and stents and ICU visits. That money could be used for good things, to send kids to college, put internet in everybody's house, pay off debts. That money is wasted. Could be used for something that really helps society. People are, despite all these trillions being spent, patients are still, as Paul said, getting heart attacks and diabetes and strokes earlier and earlier. And every time a breadwinner goes down with a heart attack or stroke, that's a taxpayer that's no longer paying taxes. That's maybe a CEO of a small company. That's their employees no longer getting paychecks. So society loses. They lose artists, they lose benefits to society. The animals certainly lose. 80 billion creatures a year get their throats cut on this planet because we like to eat their flesh, which we don't need. And the planet loses. We're cutting down the rainforest, we're using up groundwater, we're polluting our soils and rivers. Everybody loses by ignoring the importance of what our patients are eating. It's a tragedy of staggering proportions. And so at this point in my career, there's nothing else to do except sound the alarm and try and wake up these young medical students before pharmacosclerosis sets into their brains. And they think that the drugs and surgery, the only treatments for disease, is the food your patients are eating. Start there. So interesting arena in which to be working. All three of us are working in that arena, no doubt.
Meryl, before you continue with the question, Michael, I want to give you something that it's my mantra every day, because I've gotten to know Meryl very well. I know you, Michael. And the fact is, I live with this adage of like, I'm probably never going to see the promised land. I'm not sure you are. I don't know. Meryl's the young one here, so she might, but I doubt it. That being said, I just know the character of the people who are doing what I call the heavy lifting and building the foundation. So, as I go live and do things different with PBNSG and Meryl with PBNM and with the things that you're doing, I do it with not expecting to see this great outcome, but rather to build it for the next generation in the hope that they will continue it.
Absolutely. I view myself as a medical Johnny Appleseed. I'm just scattering these seeds of ideas out, and hopefully it'll land in enough fertile soil there that it may take, so you may not act on this until you've been in practice 10 years and finally reach that point. I have changed something here, but at least the seed's been planted. You can't unring the bell, once they've heard it, they've heard it. And, what's the old adage? The best time to plant a fruit tree was 20 years ago. The next best time to plant it is today. And you may never see the fruit, you may never taste the fruits, but at least they got planted. And we're all doing that kind of work, of course.
Yeah, great. So I have a question about how all this started. So, I'm a nurse, and I was in nursing school. We had like a history of nursing class, right? Which was probably my least favorite class of any ever, but okay, I would it, right? And I wound up writing a paper on the odd confluence of nurses rising, nursing coming in as a profession or an occupation. It was hardly a profession for a long time. Coinciding with the aftermath of witch hunts. So there we had during the the witch trial times, there were lots of women who were healers, and they were herbalists, and they were midwives, and they held a lot of knowledge about the healing properties of herbs and flowers and trees and things like that. The importance of keeping things clean and things like that. And then when the witch trials happened, lots of women got killed off because they were in league with the devil. And then shortly after that, within, it wasn't very long, the rise of the patriarchy started and the male-dominated medical profession started, and women were relegated to caring and not allowed to cure. So I'm wondering, that's my point of view, right? Those are the beads I strung together and came up with a story, right? Do you ever think about how did it come to the point where we disregarded the body of knowledge that kept people alive for basically millions of years, right? A body of knowledge that grew over time, related to herbs and using water and using teas and using maybe body work, massage, things like that. Till it got to the point where now we are so reliant on chemical medicine and pharmaceuticals.
Right, that's a powerful question, and it was a powerful process, no doubt. So where do we start with the story? And first of all, you are a nurse. You have those magical initials after name, RN, and blessings on you for your profession and the work you do. You will find no bigger fan of registered nurses, LPNs, all of you folks, than me. If I had a nickel for every time a nurse has saved my backside in the hospital, doctor, you better come and see this patient now. They've saved so many lives. And when I make rounds in the hospital, I see the patient, assess how they're doing, I write orders. leave it at the nurse station, and I leave and go to the office. It's the nurses who stay there and actually do the care, that will do the hands-on healing. I have such respect for you folks. And so I just want to put in a plug for nurses,
Thank you.
especially female ones, but now there's more and more male ones, and they're
Right.
wonderful.
Nurses in general.
Absolutely. So that Ahmed said, how did it start? Well, we have to go back to the beginning of the last century. In 1900, literally by 1910, honestly, Western medical education in the U.S. and Canada was a mess. There were hundreds of medical schools, and many of them were pretty dubious in what they were teaching. They would accept students who had no training at all in biology or chemistry or any of the sciences. They would be just 2 years of book reading, and they were given their MD degree and unleashed upon an unsuspecting public. There was no clinical work at all. There were no such thing as teaching hospitals, and there were a lot of charlatans out there who were doctors, but were doing more harm than good. And there was quite an uproar over this. It was getting in newspapers, etc. So in 1910, the Carnegie Foundation hired an educator named Abraham Flexner, and his charge was to go around to the nation's medical schools. He visited 155 medical schools in the United States and Canada to assess their program and see what was good, bad, indifferent, etc. So Flexner goes around to 155 medical schools, and he found a number of them really had great functioning models, which we'll talk about. But a lot of them, as I mentioned, were pretty dubious and with no clinical training at all and just book learning. And he said these folks are not safe and they should be shut down. And many of these medical schools were closed as their poor reputations got around. And the Carnegie model was to medical education should be standard, should be 4 years. The first 2 years of basic sciences, anatomy, physiology, biochemistry. The second 2 years in the hospital clinics, surgery, medicine, pediatrics, obstetrics. Those 4 years should be the standard for medical education, and every medical school should be affiliated with a teaching hospital nearby, and the students have to spend at least 2 years rotating through those services, and that was the conclusion and the model set up by the Flexner Report. And it should be based on scientific medicine, where you have to be able to prove that a certain therapy, certain drug worked. If it didn't, then it had no business in the hospital pharmacy. And that report was published in 1910, and at that point, the Rockefeller Foundation, and here enters John D. Rockefeller, and he's become this evil arch-villain figure here that, he's establishing the pharmaceutical industry so he can make lots of money. But he'd already had more money than God at this point from the Standard Oil industry. And he really, I think, really did want to see modern medicine brought into the 20th century there. And so the Rockefeller Foundation started making grants to these medical schools to establish teaching hospitals, to establish these 4-year programs, etc. And as the 20th century unfolded through the 30s, 40s, 50s, the current edifice of modern medicine came into being, and I'm a product of that. I went through that 4-year program, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's how the thing crystallized in its current form. But along the way, as you're implying, there was some collateral damage and some, I think, healing systems with value got pushed off to the side there. Naturopathy, where, as you mentioned, hot water, enough rest, sunshine, exercise, all the wonderful pillars of natural medicine were discarded. That's old wives' tale stuff, quote unquote. Homeopathy, which is, we can talk about the value of that in tiny, tiny doses, vibrational medicine, if you will, but also osteopathy. The osteopaths felt that disease came from misalignment of the bones, and if you can realign them, you'll get the energy flowing better. Kind of the early forerunner of chiropractic. And there are some valuable things in that as well. And well, those all got discarded and put into the hogwash rubric there. And of course, some valuable knowledge, along with some valuable healing practitioners suffered that loss. And we're still trying to make that deficit up. Now, as a diplomate of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, this amazing specialty of lifestyle medicines come up, and what are they doing? They're pulling back in exercise, rest, get enough sleep, stress reduction, etc. They're pulling back those natural pillars as they should have been there all along. So that's how we got to where we are, and the intentions were good, but like so many things in Western medicine, in Western society, they especially when you supercharge them with lots of money, they take on a life of their own. The pharmaceutical industry certainly did it. The medical industry itself, and medical research industry, it's just taken out there. They become these titanic entities that attract stockholders and investment capitalists, etc. And they distort in sometimes monstrous ways of achieving their ends, all under the rubric we're just working for the people, trying to get better medicine into the hands of the doctors. That's all we're trying to do here. But meanwhile, there's all sorts of political and economic forces at play at that. So a fascinating crossroads, and many crossroads are crossing at this point, and we're trying to untie the Gordian knot, which I think is an apt metaphor. If your viewers might not be familiar with the Gordian knot, it's from Greek, not necessarily mythology. It's about Alexander the Great, which was a historical figure. But Alexander the Great was coming through Asia, conquering kingdom after kingdom, and he finally pulls in with his army to the kingdom of Gordius, and King Gordius sitting on his throne there, and he says, he brings in an ox cart. And the ox cart has a rope tied around its main cross piece that it was so big, it was 5 feet across, a pure knot, trying to hold these two big beams together. And Gordius says, anyone who can untie this knot, I will give him the keys to our kingdom. He can rule the kingdom instead of me. And Alexander takes one look at this thing, and he realized there's no possible way to untie this knot. And so he reaches into his scabbard, and he pulls out his big sharp sword, and goes whack, and just cuts the Gordian knot, just cuts it right in half, and it just falls on the ground. And he cut the Gordian knot. And that's what plant-based nutrition does. It cuts the Gordian knot of disease and economics, etc. Everybody can do it. It doesn't cost anything. Order the bean chili instead of the beef chili. It doesn't cost anything, but it makes all the difference in the world. And so we're trying to wield Alexander's sword here and cut that Gordian knot. And broadcasts like this help us do that very thing.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that story about the Gordian knot. I don't think I've ever heard it. I know the analogy, but never heard the story. Yeah,
Right.
great. Paul, do you have anything you'd like to throw in there?
Let's spend a little bit on where we are at medical schools. So, I share a story that you and I share, which is, I went to Wayne. I had a group of first and second year medical students at Wayne State Medical School, and they were unique. They did care about people's health, and they created a committee. And the timing was right because Wayne State was moving away from their old curriculum to the 9 systems of the body, which now every medical school pretty much follows that model. So Wayne State Medical School, with the help of the students, 14 students from different medical schools, Wayne State came to us and said, would you create a curriculum? So after a couple months, we were working on it, and it was once a week. And I truly, you both are doctors and nurses. I had no clue of what it entails to try to be a doctor until I got involved with the doctors and saw how much how much work they have to do in their first and second year in studies. It was mind blowing. I mean, I could not believe the amount of work they had to do. And on top of it, I was pulling them away for 2, 3 hours every week for a year, to work on this curriculum. So it ended up being, we had 4 to 6 items of the 9 systems of the body, and we finally got it approved at Wayne State Medical School. And I thought, probably Michael, like you have, like, oh my God, this is the moment. This is the moment. Because now if we did it at the biggest medical school, then it should be, everyone should follow suit. And that's about the time that you had left True North and said, this is what I'm going to do. Can you give me, I'm just curious, like, where is it today, all these years later? Because it's now been 8, 9 years since we created the curriculum. So where are we today?
Well, you painfully remind me that I really should be keeping track of the current curriculum at Wayne State and see what is happening. The problem, of course, is twofold, well, manifold, I suppose. The people who agitate to make any change happens, their very presence and their persistence is the magic ingredient. Persistence is the most powerful ingredient, perseverance. And as long as they're medical students working their way through the system, they keep the administration's feet to the fire, if you will. But once they graduate and they're gone, the question is, does the enthusiasm decrease? And there's several reasons why it might. Because as became very clear to me, that we cannot underestimate the deep resistance that there is on the part of the medical establishment to incorporating the healing powers of plant-based nutrition into the medical school curriculum. Namely, this is the thought that, again, these are reversible diseases and that a plant-strong diet is the key to reversing them. Certainly threatens their intellectual model of disease. As far as they know, it's all genetic, and they just have to tease out all the enzyme functions of all the different genes, et cetera, to come up with these amazing drugs. Food has nothing to do with it. So it certainly challenges their intellectual understanding of disease. It challenges their practice model, where the doctor is in the office, sees the patient, makes a diagnosis, prescribes a treatment, and next patient. Well, in the model at True North and at the Aroga Lifestyle Clinic, where I'm working in Victoria, BC, they realize the importance of the patient's diet. And at Aroga and True North, you see the patient, and then the doctor sees the patient. The next stop is the plant-based dietitian's office, and she sees the patient and puts them on a plant-based diet and follows them up. So that means pulling the dietitian, which up to now she's been held at arm's length as an afterthought, pulling her onto the primary care treatment team. She's as important as the doctor, the nurse, the physiotherapist, whatever, and she belongs early on in the interactions. So that changes the model. Now you got the dietitian in the doctor's office, or at least just down the hall. So it changes, that model. And of course, it changes their financial model on a number of levels. One, you got to pay the dietitian, but very importantly, the more patients who clean out their own arteries, there's going to be less coronary artery bypass surgery. There's going to be less coronary artery stents placed. There's going to be less gallbladder operations. And that's going to affect the financial flow to the hospital, to the doctor, every place else. Ooh, you talk about whose ox gets gored there, non-vegan analogy. But people get upset when you start talking about their financial income. So people, they're happy with the current model. Everybody, you don't have to think, to open their borders of the box that they're in. And the money keeps coming in. They're happy with the status quo. They're good friends with the golden goose. They don't want anything to threaten her. So for me to march right in and say, "Oh, you ought to be teaching plant-based nutrition," they're going to, yeah, very nice. Run along, doctor. And there's a show us 15 double-blind placebo-controlled studies that prove that eating broccoli is healthier than eating Snickers bars. And until you give us those studies, you're a peripheral fly-by-night guy. And of course, there's so many issues with that. Nutrition studies don't lend themselves with that. People know what they eat, and they don't maintain the same diet year after year. And you can't do those kind of ironclad studies that you can do with a new drug, et cetera. But there are ways to do nutritional research. The True Health Initiative, I recommend people check out THI, the True Health Initiative. They talk about orders of proof of validation. But anyway, that's why after a few months of bouncing off administrative dean's doors, we decided, let's go right to the students. The students, many of them are already in any class, any medical school class I lecture to, there's already 10, 15, 20 students. They've seen films like Forks Over Knives. They've seen What the Health, the light's already on. It's out in the zeitgeist. The public knows that we're getting fatter and sicker, and plant-based diets are generally good. And the beauty with the medical students that I play on is, when you're a second, third, fourth year med student, boy, you're in medical school, you want to become a physician, you'll learn how to use those powerful tools. You want to learn how to use diuretics to make that edema go away. You want to learn how to use antibiotics to make that pneumonia go away. Well, I tell them, I'm going to let you in on the most powerful therapeutic tool you will ever wield. You want to actually reverse these diseases? You want to make diabetes go away? You want to make hypertension go away? It's the food. It's plant-based nutrition. And so they're very open. The letters I get back, your Dr. Klaper, your lecture was career-changing. I cannot look at clinical medicine the same way again. And so, again, I'm planting those seeds, and I say, be respectful. Don't go into outpatient clinic and wag your finger at the professors and say, why aren't you have these people on plant-based diets? Don't you know you're killing them? Just learn medicine, become a good physician, get out, and then practice medicine the way you know it ought to be practiced. But meanwhile, we are working with the American College of Lifestyle Medicine and other organizations to get plant-based nutrition. The key point is the national board exams. I had a surgeon come up to me after a lecture, says, Doc, that's very nice, your lecture there. But until they start asking questions about clinical nutrition on the national board exams, we're not going to be teaching this stuff. It's enough what we're trying to get across there. So we went to the Board of Medical Examiners and say, what do you need to get questions on the exam? They say, well, give us 1,000 questions and we'll select the most appropriate. So the American College of Lifestyle Medicine got together, came up with 1,000 lifestyle and nutrition questions, submitted it to the board. We are meeting with them, and they say, well, meet us with us in the spring and we'll give you an update. And hopefully, if we can get even 5 or 10 questions on national board exams, then we got a lance to carry into battle there. That's they're going to be asking you about this. So that'll get their attention as well. So, it's a battle that you win by inches. But again, these lectures are a way to leapfrog over all of that and plant those images of patients. And I show them before and after. You watch these patients come in obese, diabetic, hypertensive, and 11 months later, 14 months later, they're lean, they're off their meds. Don't you want this for your patient? What greater gift as a physician could you want than help your patients regain their health? And the young students are listening to that. And they said, I may not live to see it, but I think there are no question more and more plant positive doctors out there now due to our work, Plant Nutrition Projects, a lot of work there, and your work as well, getting it out there. So it's not this strange, weird California woo-woo stuff. This is solid science. And more and more people are accepting it and using it and getting off their medications. So we're in the thick of it, but there's no place else I need to be. I want to be at this point, just like you two.
Meryl, before I pass it back, a couple of quick thoughts after your answer. One is, on every talk I give now, anytime I get a chance to talk to a medical school or a doctor, I start with explain me. Explain me. Somebody who was being wheeled in for bypass surgery, and all he needed was a lifestyle change, which is a food change. 13 years later, I don't have a scar. I have lost 65 pounds and generally feel pretty great. So explain me. So that's number one. Number two is you brought up an excellent point. When I was working with the medical school students, they were fire about the whole idea of making a curriculum change, bringing in some nutrition. But as soon as they left, it went downhill. And then it was really up to the core of students each year. Some of them were, let's do this. And some of them were, no, I'm busy. Good point. Last thing, and this is my little suggestion for ACLM. You don't know what's going to come back with your 1,000 questions. I've always had this dream that one day I would meet the right people so we could create a class action suit to doctors, hospitals, and medical schools. You pick all of them or one of them. And while my pockets are like this deep, the fact is that I think that is what it would take for ACLM. I know it's radical, it's crazy, but people are dying. People are dying. And when people are dying, you got to do some crazy stuff. And I always thought that because ACLM always says, hey, this year we've got 1,500 members. Next year I got 2,000. They're so proud of it. But I'm still waiting for that aha moment. And I always thought the aha moment was, what happens if ACLM said, we got the science. We know that we can make people better. This is how you do it. And if you don't, you'll be part of the lawsuit we're going to be doing, because I go to hospitals and they serve terrible food. I talked to my doctor and he never asked me, my old doctor, he never asked me, what do I eat? Look around. So that was just my radical, crazy thought, Meryl.
No, not so crazy and not so radical, which is a plus for our society at this point. But
it might be the only chance you and I ever get to see the promised land too.
But yes, I've often thought, what we need, Dr. Esselstyn did these remarkable pilot studies, which were 200 people with bad angina and clogged arteries, got them on this reversal diet. None of them had heart attacks or strokes after that. And he's got these dramatic angiographic pictures before and after of the plaques melting away. But it's one pilot study. It would be nice to have 10 of those studies where there's no question that this plaque reversal is a real thing and it should be standard of care. Once that gets established, then you can get some very aggressive attorneys because there's going to be a lot of angry widows whose husband died on that operating table during a 4-vessel bypass, who are going to say, my husband died on an operating table and nobody mentioned to me that he could have melted those plaques away with a plant-based diet. When did you people know this? How long have you had this information? Why didn't somebody tell this to me? And I think they'll have good grounds for wrongful death suit. And then there's 10 studies showing that this plaque is reversible. Then I think they got a good case. When I mentioned this before, there was only Esselstyn study. They say that's not standard of care yet. Well, it's got to be standard of care. Plaque reversal through plant-based nutrition has to be the standard of care, and any doctor who doesn't institute that in a serious way is guilty of malpractice and should be held liable for that. It's a sin of the medical sin of the highest order there. And so yes, I agree. There will come a time when legal action will help move the boulder down the hill.
It's scary to me that I've always said too that it's going to take something so tragic to get people's attention. And I'm saying it could be something about the planet, that people are forced to eat plants. It could be that we run out of animals, or something like that, or the rainforest gets cut down. It's got to be something so horrific that catches people's attention. But I also thought it'd be nice. ACLM, they're big body of doctors. And wow, that would be some headline that doctors are suing doctors because they don't agree with the way they're caring for their patients. They just
Indeed. In my presentations now, I'm always putting in 3 or 4 slides of making the connection between our voracious appetite for animal flesh and global warming. We've cut down half the trees on this planet to make grazing land and cropland for beef for cheap cheeseburgers. And these young folks in their 20s and all the medical students are in their 20s, 30s, they're all terrified of their ecological future. What's going to happen? The ice caps are melting. It's the meat that you're eating, those burgers that you're ordering is driving this. You need to make that connection, young doctors. And so absolutely, I put that in, and hopefully that will rise to the top of their concerns.
Yeah. One of the things that we work on, certainly in plant-based nutrition movement and now in the Sage Circle Alliance, is we put children at the center of it. And so I have the pleasure of going to schools directly and talking to these kids and giving them experience of eating something other than chicken nuggets, right? Like whole plant-based foods. I don't love all of it. Let me just say that right up front, right? Yeah, beet and apple salad is not my favorite, but they're at least exposed to it, and we do give them the opportunity to connect the dots, that, yeah, you might like Burger King, you might like, Kentucky Fried Chicken, you might like Taco Bell, you might like all those things, but every time you make that choice to eat those things, it has this bigger impact on the rainforest or on other animals or whatever. And after a few lessons of that, the kids do begin to understand. I've had children come and say, I don't want to eat animals anymore. I don't want to,
Right. That's so beautiful. I really admire you, and I'm curious as well because there was a time I was going into the grammar school, the elementary schools myself, with the same message, and it's such an important message. But then after I would deliver that in school, 2 days later, so I would get a call from the principal and said, "What did you tell those students?" Because I've been getting a steady stream of calls from parents now who's got their kids sitting at the table. I don't want to eat this, mommy. They're animals. I don't want to eat it. And my kid won't eat anything now. And it causes great dissension at the kitchen table there. And so I'm curious, do you ever run into anything like that? How do you deal with that?
We have not. We have not. No, I think I wonder why. I don't know. Maybe because maybe you're going in one time. I don't know. Do you go in several times?
No, it's usually a drive-by lecture there.
Yeah, right. One time with everything you got, right?
Right.
So we've been able to go in maybe sometimes it's a one shot, a one off, but a lot of times it's 4 times. Or this past year we were able to go in 8 times after month. This coming year it'll be month after month. And we go in, we do it really gradually, really gradually. We start out talking about what is food and why do we eat food? And okay, we eat it because we like it, but why else do we eat food? What do we get from food? And how does certain food nourish our bodies? And what is the microbiome? So we go through these different things. And every time we go in, we're feeding them a huge meal. We're stuffing these little, I love feeding these kids. I love it, right? It is definitely part of why I'm on earth this time, I'm pretty sure, is to feed these kids, right? The other thing that I think is interesting is we have readier access. It's not quick access, but more ready access to low income populations, kids where it's a lower socioeconomic status. These kids are already struggling with food insecurity and nutritional insecurity. So we go in and we load these kids, right, with as much salad bar as we can, or as much whole wheat spiral pasta with red sauce and zucchini as I can load into them. And after 6 months, 7 months, whereas we start out, the children are very defensive, right? I don't eat that. I don't know what that is. I never had that. I'm a picky eater. I don't, and then by the end of 6, 7 times, they are like so excited to try whatever it is we're bringing. Oh, it's purple cabbage this time. Oh my gosh, it's tart cherries. It's whatever we're bringing, red bell pepper, whatever. And then, very often what we'll do too is if it's a situation where we've been able to teach the kids to cook, that happens sometimes, we'll give the children a set of ingredients to take home. And we'll say, now you have all of the stuff, you got the spices, you got the canned goods, you got a can opener, you got whatever you need, right? Take this home and show how to cook it. Show your parents how to cook it. Make a meal for your family. And that works wonders. That opens many a locked mind when they get the chance to taste it.
Meryl, there's a place in heaven for you just for that work alone. That is so important. And that you stay with the kids, you visit them 6-8 times, and you bring them up to the understanding. That's so beautiful. That's how it needs to be done. And you also provide a wonderful opportunity, because one thing that after I give my lecture, and I started putting in slides to preempt this question, but the audience said, yeah, but this is an expensive way to eat, and my patients live in a food desert, and we can't afford this kind of food. But the truth is, the staple foods, the ones that provide the most calories and protein, rice and beans and potatoes, they're cheap. You buy them in bulk, 10-pound bag of rice for $6.50, and again, potatoes, etc. You make up these big stews and soups and chilies and curries, and you can eat 3 days on them. And if you're not spending money on steaks and premium ice cream, you've got money left over for broccoli and zucchini and tomato sauce. So the fact you're able to, and the ultimate magic is put the food in their mouth.
Yes.
Taste is worth 1,000 words. Yeah. Oh, I could eat that. Oh, that's not bad.
Right.
Right. So
Another
where you should be working. It's wonderful.
Oh, thank you. And another funny thing, I'll just say this, peer pressure is a beautiful thing, right? And it works for you and it can work again you also. But when you're in a classroom and, 10 of the kids are sucking down their spiral pasta with the, marinara and zucchini, and there's 3 kids over in the corner going, I don't think I eat that. I don't think I like that. Well, by the time 10 of your friends are going, yeah, this is great. Well, there's the peer pressure. And then they begin to try it. We always give them option. You don't have to eat it. Don't eat it. Just taste it. Just, squish it, smell it. If you don't like it, don't eat it. It's fine. And that goes a long way with the kids, for sure.
Brilliant.
For sure. Yeah. It's a joyful thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have probably 1 or 2 more questions. Are you ready?
All right.
Okay. If a regular, average, everyday person could do one thing to make a difference, well, maybe we'll do this in 2 stages. An average person could do one thing to make a difference. What would you suggest? And then part 2 would be, if an average doctor could do one thing to make a difference, what would you suggest?
Oh my, so many possibilities suggest themselves. What the individual person could do, one is to make a positive difference in their health, is stop eating dairy products. That alone often results in weight loss, less allergies, less inflammation in the body. Go a month without dairy, and pour oat milk or rice milk on your cereal. There's so many substitutes these days. So for your health, certainly can do that. And educate yourself. If you have not seen a film called Forks Over Knives, please go to that website, watch that video, and then go back to the website. They've got transition plans, but PBNSG has resources to help people change and evolve their diet. So educate yourself, by far the 2 things you do: stop eating dairy and learn about plant-based nutrition. What can any doctor do? Go to come to our website, movingmedforward.com. We have transition materials, but so does the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. Go to plantritionuniversity.org. plantnutritionuniversity.org. They've got wonderful courses on plant-based nutrition. Educate yourself, doctor, and open your mind to the possibility that the diseases you're treating are reversible, and plant-based nutrition is the key to that reversal. Open your mind to those two possibilities, and a world of healing bliss will be yours as your patients get healthier right before your very eyes.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Paul?
Michael, you continue to amaze me. You really do. I have loved every time you spoke, every single time. And, I have found you to be one of the kindest people I've met in this plant-based world. And I just want to say thank you. Okay. Thank you.
And thank both of you for your work as well. I wouldn't be here without you, and we're all on the same team, on the same mission. So thank you. It's definitely mutual.
That's all I got. That's it. That's all I got.
My intent, the book is Moving Medicine Forward, and it's going to be addressing medical students. Here's what you should have learned in medical school. Here's how to use it in your practice. And we want to, once it's in a real book form, is to get a grant and make one copy free to all the medical students in the United States. Just give it to them. And so that's the ultimate plan. So we'll be glad to share that with you as it comes online.
Great. That's
All right.
great.
Great.
Wonderful. All right. We have Dr. Klaper's contact information. At least we will at the end of this. We'll put it in the show notes. If you are a medical student or someone who's interested in having Dr. Klaper come speak at your university, is that an okay thing to make that invitation to people?
That's what I want to do. Go to movingmedforward.org and there's a form there to fill out to bring me to your medical school, either in person or by Zoom. But absolutely, the more medical schools we reach, the better for everybody.
Beautiful. And if by chance there was a nursing school that might be interested, are you open to that, or you have ways to do that?
No, absolutely. Dental schools, pharmacy, nursing, podiatry, they all need to hear this message. They're all dealing with people with nutrition-based diseases. So absolutely, I'm happy to speak to nurses and all the allied health professionals. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, on that note, we will wrap it up. Thank you again, Dr. Klaper. Always a pleasure speaking with you. Love spending time with you. And thanks so much for moving the mission forward. The important work.
You're the best.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you. All the best.
Right. We'll see everybody next time on Sage Talk for Wicked Problems.